Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today as the representative for tens of thousands of Virginians whose earned retirement benefits have been slashed by the Windfall Elimination Provision and the government pension offset for far, far too long. And I urge my colleagues, 330 of whom have co-sponsored this legislation, to join us in passing the Social Security Fairness Act this evening and put an end to this theft. For generations, hardworking Americans have been promised that if you work hard, you save, you contribute to your Social Security, you will be afforded a secure retirement with your earned benefits. But the WEP and the GPO, two misguided provisions that were added to the Social Security Act in 1983, have denied Americans the retirement security they worked for and expected to receive. Today, the WEP steals benefits from more than 2 million retired Americans, more than 45,000 Virginians, who both paid into Social Security for long enough to earn these benefits and worked in the public sector during their careers. These are firefighters who worked a second job to make ends meet, police officers who began a second career after leaving the force, teachers who took a summer job to cover the bills and buy school supplies. And they are federal employees who went on to work in the private sector. They are all receiving a fraction of their earned Social Security benefits. And the GPO denies benefits to more than 750,000 Americans and nearly 8,000 Virginians, people who dedicated their careers to public service, who were then robbed of the survivor benefits that they should have received while dealing with the death of a spouse. These Americans, they've been punished simply because they chose to selflessly serve our communities and our country. And I have heard from thousands of Virginians about this issue. Francis, a retired police officer in Virginia, is seeing his benefits slashed by the WEP. Richard, a veteran who served our nation first in the military, then in civil service, and then in the private sector, he sees nearly half of his Social Security benefits stolen. And that's been the case for the past 15 years, even though he started working when he was 16 years old and he started paying into Social Security. For more than 40 years, public servants have tirelessly implored their representatives in Congress to listen to their stories and to correct this glaring injustice. And today, for the first time, Congress will vote on the Social Security Fairness Act to repeal the WEP and the GPO and to finally put an end to this threat, to this theft. And let me be very clear, the long-term solvency of Social Security is an issue that Congress must address, and the issue of how much those earned benefits pay to those who are in their retirement is something that must be addressed, but that is a separate issue.
I yield the lady additional time.
The gentlelady is recognized.
But that is a separate issue from allowing Americans who did their part, who contributed their earnings, for them to retire with dignity. And in signing their names onto this legislation, more than 330 lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, have made clear their belief that we must repeal the WEP and GPO, and we must pass it tonight. I urge my colleagues to join us in passing this legislation and sending it over to the United States Senate, where 61 senators who are currently serving in that body are co-sponsors of our legislation. By passing the Social Security Fairness Act, we can deliver long overdue relief to the American public, to our public servants, to those who have served our communities. I thank everyone who will speak on behalf of this bill this evening, and I thank my co-sponsor, Congressman Garrett Graves, for his extraordinary partnership as we have worked with public servants from around the country to get to this point tonight. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank Chairman Smith for the time. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to this debate and heard so many things that are simply misunderstandings or maybe just intentionally telling things that aren't true. My mom used to say when I was growing up, she would ask me, is it going to take an act of Congress for you to clean your room? She would say it all the time. Is it going to take an act of Congress for you to clean your room? And I don't know what she meant because I thought my room was pretty clean. But what she meant is that is it going to take the earth, wind, and stars all moving, mountains moving in order for you to act? Mr. Speaker, this has been 40 years. This has been 40 years of treating people differently, discriminating against a certain set of workers. These are police officers, these are teachers, these are firefighters and other public servants. Mr. Speaker, I worked side by side with these folks. They're not people that are overpaid. They're not people that are underworked. Police officers, think about the crime issue, the defund police issue, the safety of our communities. They are integral to our state. They're integral to our nation. We need to treat them fairly, respectfully, and that means by not treating them differently, discriminating against them and their benefits. Teachers, they're the ones who train the next generation. Firefighters, who are you going to call when your house is on fire? And these are the very people whose benefits we're cutting. Mr. Speaker, I've heard people sit here and say the solvency of the Social Security Trust Fund is gonna move forward 6 months with this bill. Mr. Speaker, the solvency has been delayed years because you've stolen from these people. Do you not understand math? This number right here, the Congressional Budget Office, $195 billion, you know what that number is? That's the number that you're going to be stealing from these same public servants over the next 10 years if you don't fix this. So we can sit here and we can talk about all these numbers and math. Here's the reality. You have stolen somewhere probably between $600 and $700 billion in Social Security benefits from police officers, teachers, firefighters, and other public servants. If you don't pass this, the Congressional Budget Office says you're going to steal another $195 billion. You know, an interesting nugget that was in the Congressional Budget Office's evaluation is they also said, if you actually pass this law, you're going to save money on your social welfare programs because you're going to lift people out of poverty and they'll no longer be dependent upon our social welfare programs. Mr. Speaker, we can't keep doing this. I heard people talking about penalizing people and taxes and all that stuff. Let me tell you what's happening. There is a group of people right now that effectively are paying a higher tax than anyone else. That's what's happening. And it is the reason why the Social Security Trust Fund is going to remain solvent for years longer. It's unfair. It's unjust. And I'm going to say it again. This is a community of people that cannot afford this. This is a community of people that are some of the hardest working folks in our community, and they have been stolen from for 40 years. Very simply, Mr. Speaker, here's the scenario. Let's say that Chairman Smith and I were both security guards. We got paid the same amount of money over the same period of time. After 20 years, I say I'm out, and I go back and I help to raise family. Mr. Smith goes on, Chairman Smith goes on to become a sheriff's deputy, and he does it for 10 years. When he retires, when we retire on the same exact date, my Social Security benefits may be $1,500, $1,800 more. Why? Why? We paid the same amount, same period of time into the Social Security Trust Fund. Mr. Speaker, look, there are folks that have tried to throw up other legislation and say that these other alternatives are the right way to go. Mr. Speaker, there is one bill in this Congress that has a majority of Republicans and a majority of Democrats. I don't know the number right now. I know recently it was the most co-sponsored bill in all of Congress with over 12,000 bills introduced. The most co-sponsored bill. And you know what? We didn't go through the regular committee process. I do want to thank Chairman Smith for working with us. But you know what we did? We had a hearing in Louisiana. We had a hearing in Washington, D.C. We negotiated for months trying to get there, and we couldn't. But there's one package that has the support of the majority of Republicans, the majority of Democrats, and will fix this once and for all. How in the world we're trying to beat up on the bill that is the most co-sponsored bill in Congress? My friend Mr. Larson was talking about the divisiveness, the polarization. My gosh, we have finally come together on something. Let's pass this bill. Let's show America that we can do what's right and what's just. And let's make sure this bill gets through the Senate, gets to the president's desk, and it doesn't take another 40 years to do what's right. Yield back.